Hey everyone, it is Mary Hyatt and welcome to the Mary Hyatt Show. I am, of course, thrilled about today's content because we're going to be getting into the dangers of girl talk. Guys, not guys, but girls, y'all, people, my people. How often are you engaging in conversations with your ladies that leave you feeling a little bit more depressed, a little bit more anxious, maybe a little more hopeless? We're going to get into that today and talk about how we can transition these relationships, these conversations that we're having with our girlfriends to be just more upbeat, more, all the good juice. But before we do that, I'm going to make sure everything is working from a technical side. I want to make sure that the show is up and good to go. And I'm realizing I need to plug in my computer. I am at my dear parents' house in their carriage house, so I'm not in my normal home. As you can see, I'm down here for a conference where they live this week on goal setting, which is so exciting, and getting all kinds of amazing content and getting fueled up for the year. But I had to, step away and do the show today. So let me plug in my computer. Let me make sure everything's going well, and then we will hop into the show. So hang tight with me as we do that. Not quite used to my setup over here, as it is a temporary setup. So, okay. Now we're rocking and rolling. That way I'll have power through the whole show, which is exactly what we need. But let's get into it. Let's start this show officially because I cannot wait to talk to you all about this today. It is Mary Hyatt, and welcome to the Mary Hyatt Show, episode number 62, The Dangers of Girl Talk. Y'all, I am so eager to hop into today's topic because my sweet friendships with my incredible girlfriends has been one of the most life-giving things as I've been going through so much transition in my life over the past couple years. And one of my favorite things to do is to pull them aside, start talking to my girlfriends about what's going on in my life, kind of getting feedback, getting advice, getting encouragement. And lately, it has turned into a little bit of a different vibe, a different energy, shall we say, and one that has been leaving me feeling sort of the opposite of the good juju that I normally leave with after chatting with them, and has sparked the inspiration for today's show. But before we hop into these dangers of girl talk, and sometimes what happens when girls get together and when we get excited and we start going over what's going wrong in our lives, before we do that, I want to make sure to invite you to my Peru 10-day self-discovery retreat that is happening April 7th through the 16th. You can go to maryhyatt.com/Peru retreat for all of the details for this retreat. I am just so stoked about this. I know it's the new year, it's gearing up for just massive transformation. And I think this is going to be an area that if you feel called and committed to take some serious time away, to reflect, to be in nature, to be in one of the most beautiful places in the world. We visit Machu Picchu, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. We work with different shamans and local healers and local guides to create an experience as unlike I know anything that you've ever experienced before in your life. I lead trips there and retreats there usually once a year, sometimes twice a year. I didn't go last year, not sure when I'm going to go again. So it's sort of the trip that, who knows, could be the last trip that I ever lead there, but it's one of my favorite places. And through this 10 days, through meditation, moving our bodies, doing these sacred ceremonies like a fire ceremony and releasing anything that is no longer serving us in our life, or doing a sweat lodge and like literally sweating out all of those metaphorical and literal toxins in our lives, you will emerge after those 10 days more of who you are, more of just that alive self, that one that coming home to yourself is the truest version of yourself, being able to connect with your voice, with your intuition, with your authenticity. And so I hope that you will join me for this transformational, life-changing self-discovery retreat in April. And I want to make sure that you know that the early bird special, the discounted price, the cheapest you can get this trip, ends January 15th. So if you are on the fence, if you are trying to decide whether or not you want to join me for this retreat, and it's really intimate, you're going to get a lot of one-on-one time with me. It's just, about 8 to 10 of us. So it's a really, really special time to connect. Make sure you go to maryhyatt.com/Peru retreat and look at all the details, look at the itinerary, look at it all, and make that decision by January 15th so that you can get the cheapest price available for that retreat. And I also want to encourage you to subscribe to this show. Maybe this is your first time on the Mary Hyatt Show, and just in case you aren't here regularly or you don't know much about me, we do this show every single week, and I am not on social media, so the only way to know about my shows, my upcoming events and workshops and retreats is to subscribe. So I want to make sure that I get to go with you wherever you are going on your journey. So whether that is watching this on YouTube Live, go ahead and subscribe to YouTube, whether that's listening on iTunes, subscribing on iTunes, or whatever streaming app that you are using. However you're choosing to listen to music, go ahead and subscribe right now today so that you don't miss out on any of these future episodes, any of my special announcements, because this is the only place you're going to hear any of that. Like I said, I'm not on social media, so make sure you subscribe. All right, guys, let's get into today's topic, which are the dangers of girl talk. Like I said, I love my sweet girlfriends. Girls talk and talk and talk and talk. And as we go through our life and as we have all these, big life transitions that are coming up, or issues or challenges or roadblocks that are coming up, if it's not our therapist, most likely we're going to be going to our girlfriends and bouncing ideas off of them, talking, asking for feedback, asking for advice. And it's really lovely. I mean, my girlfriends, I've got a group of about 4 ladies that we just live life with. And my girlfriends have been one of the biggest sources of encouragement and inspiration, and honestly have gotten me through divorce, have gotten me through a lot of different kinds of grief. We have walked through this journey of several of us has gotten divorced, death, kids getting into stuff. I mean, gosh, you name it. It's like we have really walked life together. And I am just so grateful for that. However, I have noticed lately that the energy of our group has kind of taken a turn towards the negative. It has really shifted in its energy, and I think that it's collective. We all sort of let it happen. We had to have a little bit of a really big come to Jesus moment. We all went on a girls' trip to the beach a couple weeks ago and before Christmas, and we had to have a come to Jesus, that's what we say in the South, by the way, come to Jesus meeting, about the ways that we were communicating with each other, about how we were talking, what we were talking about. And it's almost like this energy sort of creeped into our girl talk conversations, and those conversations became really toxic. I found myself leaving these conversations feeling defeated, feeling confused. There was just more anxiety, more fear, more doubt, more confusion. And that was so the opposite of what my experience has been with these ladies. And so it's like, what is going on here? What shifted to where I feel worse leaving a conversation with my girlfriends than I did when I started, or my problems start to seem a lot more intense or they seem bigger than they actually were when I came into the conversation. Like, what is that about? And what's interesting is I was doing some research on this and I started realizing like a lot of the decisions that I have been making in my life have been informed by my friends and their advice that they were giving. And it wasn't actually true for me. And I started going back over some of these decisions and I was starting to analyze and challenge the lens that I was looking at life through and going, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel like what's right or what's true for me. And I started realizing a lot of the issues that I'm having currently in my life kind of have stemmed from these toxic girl talk conversations. And so I started to do research on, okay, is this normal? Like, what happens when girls get together and they talk? And is this productive? Is it healthy? What do I need to change? What do I need to shift? I'm always wanting to grow. I'm always looking at something and going, this isn't working. So how do we make it better? And so I stumbled upon this really interesting noun, this word, and it's called co-rumination. Co-rumination. And researchers described co-rumination as the definition as frequently or obsessively discussing the same problem. Frequently or obsessively discussing the same problem. It's almost like you have an issue and you come together and no advice is enough. And you end up sort of looping. If you have a mind loop where you're going over the same problem over and over and over again without that problem ever changing, without that problem ever getting better. It's like these sort of ad nauseum, endless conversations about the same thing. And I was noticing that my friends and I were sort of stuck in these same patterns, stuck in these same habits, and we were repeating these habits and these patterns over and over again. And we kept talking about them over and over again. I'm like, is this Groundhog Day? Like, I feel like I've had the same freaking conversation a million freaking times. What the hell is going on? And I love this quote. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mark and Angel. Back in the day when I was on social media, they have a great Instagram. But they say the problem is not the problem. The problem is the incredible amount of overthinking you're doing with the problem. Okay, it's that overthinking. And so kind of a less scientific way, if we don't want to call it co-rumination, which sometimes I think feels like sort of a research name or a topic, or feels a little like, I don't know, a little too distant. Like, I don't really quite know what that means. So a less sexy way of talking about it, or scientific way of talking about it, is it's basically when we are complaining about the problem and we stay stuck in the conversation of what's not working, about talking about changing the behavior, but actually never doing any action to change the behavior. It's sort of like we're looking at all of the options possible. We're trying to like analyze it from every single angle. You want to solve the problem, but the advice of one friend is never really satisfying enough. And so you go on the hunt for more advice, even if it's to the same person or the same group of people. It's maybe on a different day. And you start focusing more and more and more on the problem. And we just sort of want this sympathy. We sort of want to be validated or heard or justified. But it's not from the place of we actually want to create change. We just sort of want to sit in our own muck. And we want someone to agree with our pain. We want to go around and around and around and around the same negative, toxic thing that we're dealing with in our life, this habit, this pattern, this relationship, the way we're showing up in the relationship. Oftentimes, it's focusing on the other person, what the other person is doing to us. And the problem with this kind of co-rumination is that it keeps us stuck in our pain with the illusion that we're doing something about it. It like feels productive because we're talking about it, but it actually is counterproductive because it keeps us stuck in our victim story that life is always happening to us as opposed to life is happening for us. And by talking about it, there's also something that happens, a sort of camaraderie that happens, because it feels like, okay, everybody sort of had these same issues. We feel normal, but we've lost sight of the bigger story, the gift, the opportunity, the lesson in what we're going through. We stay stuck in that pain, stuck in that story of pain, of victimhood. And pretty quickly, just by going over it and overing it, because it's an illusion that we're doing something about it, even though we're not, all of a sudden we don't have any actual desire to make it better. And so even if we felt like we had the power to make it better, we all of a sudden now feel like, I'm not abnormal. I don't feel so much pain because now my girlfriends are like agreeing with me and we're all in this together. And it ends up, and this is the dangerous part, it ends up becoming a narrative of how hard our lives are in this moment. Overall, it sucks. And it sort of becomes one giant pity party. Can anybody relate to that? If you start thinking about it, maybe it's not your girlfriends, maybe it's a conversation you have with your mom. Every time you talk with your mom, it ends up sort of getting into this co-rumination, or your significant other or a coworker. It sort of goes into that place of looping over and over again of the same problem. And I don't know about you guys, but this is really the opposite of how I want to exist in my relationships, especially in the relationships that I give a lot of energy to. I ultimately, my heart, and I know that y'all would agree with me on this, ultimately, I want to be in healthy, thriving relationships, that remind me that I am whole, that remind me that everything is working together for my good, reminding me that I always have the power and the choice to create the life that I love, reminding me that I am resilient, reminding me that I am perfect as I am right now, reminding me of hope, reminding me of love, reminding me of healing, bringing out the very best, the highest in my healthiest self. Right? That is really what I want to desire. And so co-ruminating fosters the exact opposite of that desire. It feeds fear, it feeds anxiety and distrust, it fosters depression and fosters learned helplessness and leaves us feeling powerless that we could do anything to make our lives better. That's why it's so dangerous. It gets us into the place of being a total victim. So imagine this picture for a second. So I'm going to create kind of a word picture. Imagine you find yourself walking along a path and then you accidentally take a misstep and you find yourself stuck in a really deep puddle of mud and water. And you realize like, oh my God, this is so hard to walk in this mud. And just being in this mud, you're sort of getting trapped and it's feeling deeper and heavier and you're having a hard time picking your boots up out of the mud. You start becoming afraid. You go, oh my God, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm going to be stuck here forever. Co-ruminating is like having your closest friends in the mud with you. And you start talking about how dark it is, how cold that mud is, how deep the mud is, how your legs are starting to hurt, and how everyone in this scenario is just looking down at their feet, commenting about how much this sucks to be in the mud. And just by talking about how horrible this mud is, it intensifies the experience. You start to believe that you're never going to get out of this puddle of mud. And eventually this goes on long enough as everybody's just staring at their own feet, ruminating over how horrible this is, how stuck you feel, how helpless you feel, that eventually, if this goes on long enough, you stop trying to find a way out. You stop thinking and coming up with solutions, creatively innovating ways of how you can get out of this, how you can get the help that you need. And this is why it's so dangerous, because it leaves you ultimately feeling paralyzed. And that this is sort of the only option. Like, I just have to live this horrible life where my relationships suck, my business sucks, my body, I hate my body. It's like anytime that we kind of come together and ruminate over this toxicity in our lives, the negativity in our lives, the things that aren't going well, we start to feel paralyzed. And kind of let me just say too, like acknowledging that you're in the puddle and that it sucks right now is one thing. Obviously, we're all going to have muddy puddles that we're going to have to go through, okay? Feeling that temporary feeling of sadness or grief or loneliness is healthy. Like we need to sit in that. We need to feel our emotions. But there's a difference when we shift into that obsessive ruminating on it, finding camaraderie in the misery, agreeing with the hopeless future and story, making it more intense by focusing on how bad it is. It's like poison, it keeps you stuck and ultimately kills you. And I like this quote from Anita Renfro, and she says, difficulty is inevitable. Drama is a choice. And it's so true. I mean, it's like we have the choice to participate in the drama and making it worse and bigger and more dramatic than it needs to be, or we can empower each other to make the changes we need to make in order to get out of our certain situation or circumstance to make our lives more of what we want. So as I was researching this, I came across this article in the New York Times, and they quoted this woman, Dr. Rose, who's an assistant professor of psychological sciences at the University of Missouri, Columbia. And she says, when girls are talking about problems, it probably feels good to get that level of support and validation. However, this is a study done on co-rumination, and it was published in the Journal of Developmental Psychology last year. She said, but they are not putting two and two together, that actually this excessive talking can make them feel worse. It's like contagious anxiety or contagious fear or contagious depression. And by sort of putting this spotlight on the toxicity for long periods of time, you can't help but be like a moth drawn to a flame. It's like you're going to go into that toxicity too. And so how do we begin to break ourselves of this cycle of co-rumination in our conversations with our girlfriends? And to me, and if you've listened to my show for a while, you kind of know it always comes back to this, that it starts with asking more intelligent questions, upping our level of awareness. Okay, what's going on in these conversations? Seeing how they are playing out. And we don't have to just go along and surrender to the way these conversations are going. We can actually change this kind of girl talk from the inside out. And that's what we had to do as my sweet girlfriends and I. We sort of all came to this new awareness together, and we were like, what happened? Like, these conversations suck right now. Like, I love you, but I feel like shit when I leave these conversations. Like, something's got to give, guys. Like, we have got to change this. And we had, like I said, this come to Jesus meeting at the beach, and we were like, okay, from now on, we are not going to be talking this way. We're going to be challenging each other, holding each other accountable to what we really want out of our lives, encouraging each other to make positive changes. But we had to up our level of awareness first, and we did that by asking 4 questions. So I'm going to talk about these 4 questions that you can begin to ask in the middle when you find yourself in a conversation with a girlfriend or a group of girlfriends. You can kind of pause to ask yourself these 4 questions that will then lead you to change that co-ruminating to more productive conversations that leave you feeling encouraged and inspired. But before I hop into those 4 questions, I want to make sure that you know about my Babe Redefined 6-week online course. Now, guys, this is a course that will really help you make peace with the mirror, quiet your inner bully, and love your body. If you struggle with loving your body, if you struggle with accepting your body as it is, and you've been feeling tempted to start a new diet or a new workout regimen, and you really feel like something in my body has to change before I am loved, and you feel like the only way to do that is to diet, is to restrict, is to somehow control your outside appearance in order to be loved internally, this course really is for you. It is a course to help you love your body today. And it's a deep course. We go into 6 different modules, which I cover in the on the website, where you can look at that and see exactly what we go over at maryhyatt.com/babe redefined, maryhyatt.com/babe redefined. So go on over there, check it out, because I really want this year to be the year not of fixing yourself or trying to fix what's broken or figuring out how to adapt and change and get your body into a place where maybe this is the year finally you lose weight, or you change this or you change that, and then you'll have the life that makes you happy. Then you'll have the relationship that makes you happy. Then you'll have a thriving business. What if 2019 was the year that you decided to fiercely love yourself? I want to read this testimonial from Heather. She went through my course last year, and she said, "When I went on my first diet at the age of 10 and have hated my body ever since. When I realized at the age of 40 that it's not about another diet and that it's truly about finally loving my body just as it is, I knew I needed a teacher that I could trust and that I knew exactly how I feel. Mary is that person for me. Mary and the Babe Redefined course allowed me to learn techniques while digging deep within myself to break free from the mindset that I've lived with my whole life. This is a constant journey, and Mary's raw authenticity continues to serve as a compass for me on my path." So I want to encourage you to go check that out. See if this would be a beautiful, helpful resource for you. maryhyatt.com/babe redefined, to allow this year to be the year that you choose to love your body, that you choose to accept your body, and you do the work necessary to get all those voices, all those body bully voices that are telling you that you're ugly and gross and disgusting and that you need to lose weight, that you actually silence those for good and make peace with the mirror. So head on over there and check that out. Okay, so back to the 4 questions that you really need to ask yourself in order to break this toxicity in your relationship and your conversation with your girlfriends. So let's talk about the 4 questions to ask yourself during girl talk. A little bit different than pillow talk. We're talking about girl talk today. So the first question is this a viable source for advice? Now, this is kind of twofold. So when you think about your friends and you think about as you're going to them with this issue, with this problem, with this concern of something that's happening in your life, obviously something that's probably not going well in your life, is this a viable source for advice? Meaning, number 1, are they someone who has earned the right to have a vote in your life? Are they the closest of the closest? Are they a vault? Are they somebody that you can trust? Are they somebody that is really sort of in that inner circle? You know, are the people that you're talking to about your problems, have they earned the right to have a vote in your life? That's the first piece of this. The second piece of this is the person you're asking for advice from living the life that you are wanting to live? Do they have a healthy, thriving relationship? For example, if you were going to be talking to them about relationships, like, I'm not going to hire somebody to take my business to the next level who hasn't ever started a company and is already running it successfully. Like, they're not going to have the life skills and life experience to help me navigate issues that come up with business if they've never been through it and have come off to the other side and are in a thriving business. Same with relationships. I'm not going to go ask advice from people who aren't in a healthy, thriving, committed, passionate relationship. So are the people that you're talking to, are they a viable source for advice? Because if you are taking advice from someone who is in the midst of their own work and their own process in that given area, oftentimes what's going to happen is it's just going to end up being sort of a regurgitated version of their own story projected from their own limiting beliefs. And then it's like the blind leading the blind. It's like my mom, she's so funny. She always says, you can't heal your own sick mind with your own sick mind. So it's like if you're going to other people who have that same kind of sickness as you, yeah, it's going to feel good because you are going to be able to talk about the same things. You have the same symptoms. You have the same limiting beliefs. You probably have the same fears. You probably have the same doubts. But you're kind of both in the dark together. Like you're not going to be able to find a way out. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up co-ruminating. You're going to get stuck in that cycle of the looping. So question number 1 is this person a viable source for advice? If they're not, that's probably not the topic of conversation that you want to have with that person. It's not like you have to end the relationship and never talk to them again, but it's just not the person you're going to go to for advice, if that makes sense. You may share what you're doing, but you're not offering it up for feedback, opinion, or commenting. Okay, so this kind of leads us into question number 2, which is, do I want that to be my story? Now, there are a million ways to interpret any given thing that happens in your life. Each thing that happens, we get to choose how we interpret it. And we get to choose if we adopt someone else's interpretation of what it means. And so just because one of my girlfriends happens to see something one way or interpret it in one way, it doesn't mean that that has to be true for me. That doesn't mean that it has to be my story or my journey. And it doesn't mean that I have to want that to be my story. I know you guys know that I love Louise Hay, sort of the mother of self-help. And I love this saying, and I say it to myself often. It might be true for some, but it's not true for me. It's like it gives us that pause to go, wait a second, do I want to believe that? Do I want that to be my story as well? Because often in our co-ruminating, what happens is we're sort of sharing the story that is the story based out of fear. It's not always our most empowering story, our empowering interpretation, our empowering lens. It's usually the lens of doubt, of fear. And I think probably what we really want is for somebody to say, girl, that's so not true. Let me tell you what the truth is. The truth is you are going to have an amazing life. The truth is there is an amazing man waiting for you. The truth is your business will be successful. The truth is you can heal this. The truth is you will be your most thriving self. But oftentimes the lens we get is, oh, God, I know. This happened to me the other day. And I mean, that, you just know like all men are this, or, it's really hard to build a business, or this is a really horrible time to build a business, or everything seems to be going to shit right now, or God, 2019 is going to be another horrible year. Last year was so hard and this year is going to be the same. It's like we usually come at each other to offer sympathy. Like we want to feel like we're together in it. And how we do that is by validating each other's pain story, by validating each other's fear story. Like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm with you too. I feel the same thing. And then we get stuck in it, So the truth is, I don't want to believe that all people or all men are narcissists. That's one of my friend's stories, or that it's hard to find good men, or, that all the schools are handicapping our children. Because the reality is these are just opinions. These are just one way to see the situation, one lens to look through, and they are not fact. It's just a perspective. So every time a girlfriend shares some advice with me or throws out kind of a blanket statement of, yeah, this is how it is, I get to decide if I agree or not. If I want to hitch my wagon to that story, to their interpretation of life. And the truth is, a lot of times it's a no. I don't want that to be my story. I don't want to give that limiting belief that they might have or fear any power in my life. Because if I believe, for example, their story that all men are narcissists, If I choose to believe that and agree and adopt that as my story, it's not going to give me what I actually want. It's not going to foster trust and intimacy for me. It just creates more fear. It just creates more distress. And it's like, are some men narcissists, for example? Sure. But I don't want to look at everything that my person does with the lens of, well, all men are narcissists, so this is happening because he is one too. That's not empowering. That's not a powering present interpretation for me. That's not my story. That's not my belief. And so you get to decide, do I want their story, their way of seeing the world to be mine as well? Pause, question, challenge it. So the third question is in the midst of these girl talk conversations, you're going to ask, what are we focusing on? What are we focusing on? Because in girl talk, a lot of times it ends up being a lot of focus on what is not happening that's going well. It's looking at what is missing. It's focusing on the negative. How our significant other is a lousy lover, both emotionally and physically. We focus on what's missing. We focus on what's not working, what's been hurtful, and what we wish we had that we don't have currently or could never get. And the truth is, there is always going to be something missing in our lives if we look for it, right? That's the truth. If I start focusing on what's not going well, what's missing out of my relationships or my business or where I'm falling short or even in my body or my revenue in my business, I'm going to find it. Whatever I'm looking for, I'm going to find. So what are you focusing on? Because if we focus on what is missing, it's never going to give us what we actually want. The drama of it all is keeping us distracted from taking the exact action that we need to be taking in order to get to what we want, to have that better life. And unknowingly, by focusing on what's going wrong, it puts you into that victim mentality where everything starts to feel like it's happening to you. Everyone is treating you so poorly. And then because of that sympathy that we get from our girlfriends, it takes our power away and it gets us stuck in feeling sorry for ourselves. So pause in the conversation and ask yourself, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on what's missing? What's not going well? What's feeling really yucky? What are we focusing on? And is that actually going to give me what it is that I'm truly after? And the final question number 4, and I love this one, is are we problem dwelling or problem solving? Are we problem dwelling or problem solving? I don't know why, but that is a little tongue twister for me today. But is this helping lead me into a more empowered state? Am I taking responsibility for how I have contributed to creating and allowing this? Like, where's my part in this? What can I do to make this better? Those are problem-solving types of questions. To own what is mine, to own, and to do what I need to do in order to create a life that feels more aligned with what it is that I want. What actions do I need to take? What's the next right step? How can I get more of what I want? How can we ask ourselves these tough questions in the midst of a issue that's being brought up, a problem that we're having, a roadblock, a setback, a frustration, a resentment, a fear, a doubt? How can we challenge these limiting beliefs and walk ourselves towards a more empowering future? Are we problem dwelling or problem solving? And so it's sort of like in these conversations, pausing to ask ourselves, is this conversation constructive? Are we actually finding ways to solve our issue? That's how we break out of this cycle with the conversations with our girlfriends. And, when you think about these questions, is this a viable source for advice? Do I want that to be my story? What are we focusing on? And is this problem dwelling or problem solving? When we think about these questions, this level of awareness of our conversation, sort of analyzing, looking at our conversations is giving us the opportunity to go, whoa, do I need to break this cycle of this habitual, obsessive looping that's happening in my girlfriend conversations that's leading me feeling more depressed, more anxious, more confused? You know, is this what's happening? And what can I do to change it and lead these conversations into something that's more empowering? Because the truth of life is that I believe it's a lot kinder than the stories that we co-ruminate on with our girlfriends. That we are so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for, and that we can always, always, always do something to change our life right here, right now. That there's always a way forward for a better present and for a better future, always. And I believe that my job as a great friend is to not let my girlfriends buy into their bullshit stories that life is out to get them. I want to challenge them. And I've had to do that. They've had to challenge me and say, wait a minute. This isn't how we want to communicate. And so that is my encouragement to you. To ask yourself these 4 questions during your next conversation with your girlfriends and see if you need to break this cycle of toxic co-ruminating. And if necessary, reset the energy, reset that vibe in your girlfriend circles. You know, be the one to lead your girlfriends into a new way of communicating, because we need our girl friendships. I mean, we need to have a safe space to talk about what's going on in our lives. This is what makes us so uniquely feminine, so beautiful, that we want to come together, that we need to sort of like verbally process all of this stuff. Men don't need that. You know, it's sort of like, how are you? Great. Cool. What's going on? Oh, not much. Yeah, kind of crazy. Big deal. I mean, it's like the shorthand version. Women, we need to talk about it. We need to drink wine. We need to sit. We need to cry, right? We need that. But if we're not careful, it can really quickly turn into something that's toxic, where we're playing out all of these victim stories and sympathizing with each other on them. So, ladies, let's hold each other and our friendships to a higher standard. You know, one where our conversations with each other are life-giving, where they are encouraging, where they are empowering, where they hold our highest selves accountable, where we believe the best in others and the best in ourselves, where these conversations, we stop the judging of ourselves and of other people, the blaming, the projecting, where we listen, we empathize, we validate, and we hold the space for each other, but relationships that don't ruminate on the toxic versions of the life story. We have such a absolutely beautiful gift in each other. So let's bring in the light when we come together. Let us bring in the love when we come together, and let our friendships be a place of loving action and problem solving towards our best selves and our best lives. That is life-giving. So I encourage you to shift the way that you are looking and communicating in your girlfriend relationships. And guys, thank you so much for being on the show today. I hope this information was helpful. And of course, I am here every single week. So check out back episodes any way that you listen to music, whether it's iTunes or SoundCloud, or if you watch these videos on YouTube Live, make sure that you subscribe to them. Go back and listen to past episodes as often as you want, and I will be with you every week. But if you don't subscribe, you won't know about them. You won't hear about my events. You won't hear about all of my upcoming fabulous things that I've got planned for this year. So make sure that you hit subscribe on YouTube. If you're on iTunes, I also want to ask that you leave me a fabulous 5-star review. And of course, if you feel extra generous, you can write a personal review of how this show has impacted your life and transformed the way that you think about your life, your relationships, and your body. And of course, that just helps me get more people listening to this podcast, watching the YouTube live show, and it is a win-win for everybody. So I hope that you will do that and of course, subscribe. But until then, the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.